Today on What It's Like, the origin story or evolution of the Jeep. And our story goes clear back to 1940 in Butler, Pennsylvania. American Bantam was the maker of the original Jeep. For those unfamiliar with American Bantam, founded by Ray Evans and William Ward Jr., they purchased assets from American Austin Car Company. In 1936, American Austin made small cars like Crosley, but getting back to the Jeep, the idea behind the project, and honestly, the Jeep wouldn't exist if World War II never happened. The Army was looking for a small, nimble reconnaissance vehicle to replace the horse. Side note, did you ever wonder how much waste a single horse puts out in one day? According to Google, one horse that weighs an average of 1,000 pounds puts out 31 pounds of feces and 2.4 gallons of urine for a combined 51 pounds of waste per day. So in a week, one horse produces 357 pounds of poop or feces or waste a week. That is a huge problem if you have a whole bunch of horses. The horse, even though it was very useful on the battlefield, it had compound problems. Not only did it produce waste, but it also ate between 12 and 15 pounds of hay per day per horse. As you can see, the horse is kind of becoming a problem for the U.S. Army. American Bantam delivered the first Jeep for testing September 23rd, 1940 at Camp Holabird, U.S. Army base just east of Baltimore, Maryland. Engineers from both Ford and Willis Overland were present. It is pronounced Willis, not Willys. Before getting into the whole testing aspect of it, let's talk about what the U.S. Army was looking for. They were looking for a small, nimble reconnaissance car that was four-wheel drive, had a short wheelbase, that was lightweight, speed range between 3 to 50 miles per hour. They contacted 185 companies, and out of the 185 companies, American Bantam, Willis, and Ford decided that they would build a vehicle. Willis needed more time to construct their car. American Bantam was the only one that came up with a design, a fully functional design, in 49 days. Harold Christ was the brains, the chief engineer behind the American Bantam, previously worked for Duesenberg and Stutz. He and Carl Probst laid the groundwork for what would be the Bantam Reconnaissance Car, or BRC for short. The American Bantam would be the base of what would become the World War II Jeep, aka Mark II or BRC-60. American Bantam was the sole company making Jeeps for the war in 1940. Bantam would build 2,675 Jeeps between the years of 1940 to 1943. Most were delivered in 1941. What ended up happening was Bantam lacked the space to build the amount of Jeeps the U.S. Army really needed. The Army gave the BRC Bantam 40 to Willis Overland, and Ford did produce Jeeps as well. Let's stop right here to clarify some things. The name Jeep, where did it come from? It came from the U.S. Army. It was used as a slang term for new recruits or vehicles. It's important to note that the earliest four-wheel drive mass-produced vehicle was the Jeep. Bantam produced the BRC-40. It was the lightest, most nimble of all early built Jeeps. It had good suspension, good brakes, and got phenomenal gas mileage. Willis Overland looked like this. Was the last company to make the Jeep. They started June of 1941. It was labeled as MA for Military Model A. Ford looked like this. The Ford did make the Jeep during the war. It was called GP. The G stood for government contract, P for 80-inch wheelbase. It's important to note that the Bantam rode the shortest of the wheelbases of all of the Jeeps on offer. 75 inches was the wheelbase. When the U.S. government gave the contract to build the BRC-40 to Willis, they basically closed the door in American Bantam's face. Bantam would go on to make trailers like the T3. After the war, Bantam would still make trailers for the Jeep, for the civilian market. Bantam got shafted in this whole deal. In 1943, they had a marketing campaign. Ivan got his Jeep from Bantam. American Bantam was ultimately acquired by American Rolling Mills in 1956. In 1943, Willis Overland attempted to patent the Jeep, and it's important to note that they did not invent the Jeep. They only built it during the war. And to be 100% fair, they didn't even create the iconic Jeep grille. That was Ford's doing. Willis essentially took the Bantam Jeep and took the grille from Ford and slapped their name on it and sold it for years. Willis Overland and Ford ended up building 653,568 military Jeeps for World War II. It's important to note that Willis Overland trademarked or tried to trademark the Jeep on February 13th, 1943. It wasn't until several deniers from Patent Office about the Jeep name, because not one person invented the Jeep. The U.S. Army came up with the name for it, Ford came up with the grille for it, American Bantam came up with the body for it, and Willis wanted to take credit for all of it. Eventually, they were awarded the patent name trademark certification in 1950 for reasons I can't explain. After the war, Willis decided not to go back into the passenger car production, but went all in on their newly adopted child, the cash cow, the Jeep. Before going on with the evolution of the Jeep, ever wonder about copycat companies or companies trying to get their own version of the Jeep out there? Land Rover started building Jeep-like vehicles in 1948, 8 years after the Bantam was introduced. Crosley had a Jeep-like vehicle called the Farm O Road. It was produced from 1950 to 1951. It was the jack of all trades, master of none. It was almost like the Amplicar of Jeep-like vehicles. It had tons of attachments to use on the farm. 1951, Toyota made the Land Cruiser by reverse engineering an American Bantam. Side note, I chose not to include the G-Wagon. It did not come out until 1972. I also did not include the International Scout, Ford Bronco, and Chevy Blazer because they took what the Jeep had and made a way more capable off-road vehicle. 1945 saw the release of the legendary CJ2A, the first civilian Jeep for the civilian market. It's important to note that they had two models that came before the CJ2A, the CJ2 and the CJ1, but they wasn't mass produced. CJ stands for Civilian Jeep. This was the first civilian car to offer four-wheel drive that was mass produced. There was only one problem, a problem that Willis didn't foresee: a market to sell the Jeep. They were originally marketed as an all-purpose farm-type vehicle, precursor to the quad or ATV. Willis offered many body styles like trucks, wagons, the regular Jeep. In 1948 through 1950, they offered the Jeepster. It was a convertible Jeep that rode a longer 104-inch wheelbase, designed by Brooks Stevens. In 1952, Willis went back to producing passenger cars. In 1953, American industrialist Henry J. Kaiser, the man behind the Kaiser shipyards, with absolutely no shipbuilding experience, built Liberty ships at his company cheaper and better and faster than anybody else. His company also helped build the Hoover Dam. He was also in the automotive business. His company, Kaiser Motors, bought Willis Overland for the Jeep name in 1953, but kept the name Willis Motors. In 1955, Willis and Kaiser would phase out their American production passenger car lines and went all in on the Jeep. It's important to note that Willis did offer passenger cars for the Brazilian market. Willis Motors would produce the Jeep Wagon, Jeep Forward Control FC150, the CJ, Wagoneer, and Gladiator, which were also designed by Brooks Stevens. In 1963, they would change their name to Kaiser Jeep. American Motors, or AMC for short, during the Kaiser Jeep era was supplying engines for the Jeep. Looking to expand their model line, was in talks with Kaiser Jeep to buy the company. A deal was finally made in February of 1970. AMC bought Kaiser Jeep for $70 million, a total gamble that top AMC management didn't agree with. AMC would have the Jeep brand for 17 years, and what a 17 years it was. This is when Jeep evolved into the Jeep that is remembered today. We are not getting into every single Jeep made by AMC because there are tons of special editions. You had the J10, the J20, CJ5, Renegade, Cherokee, SJ, Cherokee Chief SJ, CJ7, Wagoneer, Grand Wagoneer, and the Comanche. AMC started hemorrhaging money in the late 70s. Trying to make a really long story short, AMC decided to partner with Renault. You know things are bad when partnering with Renault sounds like the best plan to stay afloat. By 1983, Renault owned 49% of AMC. AMC had a Hail Mary up their sleeve, which came in 1980 in the form of AMC Eagle. It featured a four-wheel drive system, and it came in a car and a wagon. This was the precursor to the Subaru Outback. The same four-wheel drive system was going to be used in the brand new Jeep Cherokee ZJ. In 1985, 60 Minutes ran a story on the CJ5, how it had tendencies to roll over in extreme conditions. AMC between a rock and a hard place. On March 9th, 1987, Chrysler bought Renault's shares of AMC for $1.5 billion. Chrysler only wanted Jeep. See the trend? AMC built a new plant in Canada, and AMC had a network of 1,300 dealerships nationwide. Chrysler wanted all of that. Chrysler would keep producing the Wagoneer and the Grand Wagoneer, as well as Jeep Comanche. While under Chrysler, Jeep would offer the Wrangler in 1986 as a two-door with tons of trim levels and package options. The Grand Cherokee ZJ, which was basically an AMC product with a Chrysler badge because it was already done and it was just waiting to be produced. AMC just ran out of money. 2007 saw the release of the four-door Wrangler. It's also important to note all of the changes that Chrysler went through. Chrysler changed hands a bunch of different times. Like, Chrysler was in business until 1998 and then became Daimler Chrysler in 1998. That lasted until 2007 when Chrysler made an LLC. That only lasted for 2 years, and then they did Chrysler Group LLC in 2009, Fiat Chrysler 2014, and now they are currently under new management. Stellantis took over in 2021, and you begin to question, is it the automaker or the product? Just for reference, that's 11 companies owned the Jeep at one period in time. All of the companies that own Jeep are either bankrupt or no longer exist. It really makes you wonder. It really does. Anyway, that brings us up to today. Stellantis offers the Wagoneer, the Grand Wagoneer, the Wrangler with countless number of trim levels. Seriously, I don't think that there is a single off-road car that offers as many trim levels as the Wrangler. It is equivalent to like the Ford Mustang. The Ford Mustang has so many trim levels. Even though I'm a huge fan of the Mustang, give it a break. Like, seriously, you don't need 50 different trim levels to sell a car. Or maybe you do, I don't know. The Gladiator, Jeep Grand Cherokee, they're going to even electrify the Jeep with the Jeep Recon. All right, now it's time for Would You Rather, steak or chicken, paper or plastic. 2 scenarios today. In the first scenario, 1940 Bantam Jeep, or 1942 Willys Jeep, or 1941 Ford GP. I am going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free to pause the video. Moving to the second scenario, J10 or Comanche or New Gladiator. Once again, going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. All right, now it's time for Name That Tune. First person to give both the name of the band and song title, first person to do both correctly will have their comment pinned to the top of the comment section. That's what Jeep is, just empty every pocket. Anyway, thank you all so much for coming out and watching this. If you'd like to get in touch with me, shoot me a comment in the comment section below, or check out our Facebook group that correlates with this YouTube channel. And honestly, that is the easiest way to contact me, is find me on Facebook and send me a message. If you don't have Facebook, send me an email. All of that information will be linked in the description below. Just know I appreciate all the support. And until next time, here's some scenes for our next episode. 1940 LaSalle. That's what's coming up next. Tune in Sunday, 4:30 Eastern Standard Time to catch that episode. And until then, toodaloo! Oh, you know what really grinds my gears? People who have to slap their name all over images that they didn't take pictures of. Like, check out this one, Getty Images. I don't think Getty Images was around in the 50s to take this picture. Or how about this advertisement piece that you can't use because they put squiggly lines all through it? It's not theirs.
And that's what really grinds my gears.